Hey YouTube, welcome back to the Bad to the Stone shop. Pebbles just went through a major suspension upgrade here. We just went with the Baja Kits Pre-Runner Package all around. While we were in there, we changed out that front steering rack with the heavy-duty steering rack from Ford Performance. Again, the Pre-Runner kit, so we changed out all the suspension parts on the front end with those Baja Kits parts. The trailing arms, upper links, went through, did the whole thing. I know that Baja Kits has a great video out there on installing their kit, but there was a few details that they don't show in the video, so I tried to really just focus on some of those differences, some of those details that you're not going to find in their video. Just going through all the parts, showing how all the parts fit together, what's inside all the packages. So again, good focus on that. We'll come back and I'll give you my thoughts on how this thing is doing, but go ahead, let's head on into the shop. Hey, if you're new to the channel, I encourage you to get out there and check out some of the other videos, some of the other mods we've got on Pebbles, our 2023 Bronco Badlands. If you like what you see, hit that subscribe button. Make sure you're tuning in for the rest of the videos. All right, let's go do a walk around. Let's see what she looked like originally, and we'll have something to compare to at the end, and then we're gonna jump right into this. Let's go. All right, here is a last look at Pebbles before we do our full Baja Kits transformation. So let's do one last walk around in that stock Badlands configuration. And then we'll do a walk around once we get this Baja Kits all completely installed on there. See what kind of tire poke difference we've got. Looks like in there with those bypass and those different links. All right, next time you see her, she's gonna look a little different. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at some of this hardware and some of the detail that you might not be getting in that other Baja Kits video. Here we got our AC running, we got our wall built back there to try to keep us cool, so sorry for the noise. I'll dub over this if I have to, if the sound is too bad with that AC running. These are for the bypass on the rear. So this is gonna be the upper bracket, and then we've got the lower bracket. So I've got the hardware in there. Comes with 4 of these short bolts, washers, nylocks, you know, 2 on this side, 2 there. You've got a longer bolt to go through the lower, and then a shorter bolt to go through where you're gonna hold that bypass in on the upper. This is gonna go in there like this. So we've got the Baja Kits. It comes with the rivets. We had to pop rivet that on there. So we already have this pretty much laid out and put together. We ended up with some extra bolts. It came with 3 extra long bolts, but no washers or anything to go with them. Not sure where those 3 extra bolts go. Haven't figured that out yet. I see some holes in there, but I don't believe there's any place else we're gonna use those other 3 bolts. So we've got that all set. This cover plate, we've got the hole that goes, the bolt that goes through it, so you get an extra long bolt to take care of that. Looks like it comes with a nice big spacer to go in there, washers for the other end, and then it has some countersunk bolts with washers and nuts. I believe those go into existing holes on the vehicle. We'll play with that when we get there. All right, I'm dubbing over this because I had it wrong when I recorded it the first time. What you've got here is you've got some black Delin spacers, and you have 2 different length of misaligns. You've got a shorter one and a longer one, and it's really clear once you take out the old pieces that you need to put the 2 longer ones on the front end, and you put the 2 shorter ones on the back end, not one on each side like I've got here. And the plastic Delin decorative piece does always go on the shorter misaligns. So essentially, you're going to have the 2 shorter misaligns on that back end. You're going to put a piece of the plastic Delin on each side. So when you're looking under the vehicle from the back side, you would see both of those nice black spacers, fills in the space a little bit better, and the 2 longer misaligns are always going to go on the front. And like I say, if you measure the links when you're pulling them out, either the trailing arms or those upper links, it's really clear that the one end is wider than the other. So there is the rear hardware all pretty much assembled and put together. That's what that looks like. We'll make sure we get some shots. I still have not quite figured out with where the logo is, exactly what is the driver's side or passenger side for those uppers. I do know that for the lowers, on the passenger side, the Baja Kits logo does not face outwards, and that clearance goes around the shock. And then on the driver's side, that's on the facing the outside of the vehicle. So we've got that figured out which side these go on. Not positive I have this one right yet. We'll figure that out. All right, on that box lower, here is a look at everything that comes in there. So you get your Baja Kits badge, a couple of rivets. That's gonna go right on in here. You can see those two holes. We've got where the shock mount is gonna go. So you've got some long bolts. Those are gonna go up from the bottom. It comes with these two shorter bolts with a washer. I have yet to figure out where those go. I'm not quite sure what happens with those. We've got our misaligned kit that's gonna go up here through the ball joint. We've got the mount for where the sway bar link is gonna go. We've got an extra mount over there if you're gonna do front bypass shocks. Didn't even know that was available. That seems to be new on there. So there's a mount for a front bypass. I have not seen the upper for the front bypasses. Maybe when those are available, might have to add those. And then coming back here to the rear, you get a couple of grease fittings that are gonna go into the bottom side here. And then you've got these heavy Delin bushings, the little grease groove in there, and your alignment plug that's gonna go in there. So these are a nice tight sort of tap in fit. Grease it up a little bit, get those pins in there. I had to clean up the powder coat on the edge of these a little bit where it was just kind of went a little wide. So just a little bit of quick cleanup, and then we'll get this all put together. Here is a look at one that is already all together. So again, we've got those Delrins in there. We've already got this one greased up, piece through, got the bolts coming up from the bottom to get the shock on. Got it all put together on this side. Like I say, still have those two extra bolts, not sure what those do. And then we've got the Baja Kits badge riveted on over there. So that one is pretty much ready to go. And then here's what the setup looks like for that sway bar link. So you've got a heavy 9/16 bolt. That's gonna go down in there through this hole. You've got this clevis. And then the links, you've got a hardware kit. So you've got these misaligns, these little short ones that go on each side inside the clevis, and a nice 12mm bolt through there. On the top side, haven't exactly figured out which side goes for the sway bar, but again, you've got misaligns, you've got a long one. So I'm assuming that that long one is gonna go up against the sway bar to keep us a little bit further away from it, maybe balance it out. And then this would go through the sway bar nut on the other side. So that's gonna be the top side. But again, you've got misaligns on both ends of that, a clevis, and that bolts into the box lower here. And then there's that spot for that bypass shock again. All right, let's move on and take a look at all the hardware for the uppers. All right, let's take a look at these upper control arms and all the hardware that goes with that. So they come all disassembled. You've got some cross bolts that go in here to help lock this in place. You've got your balls that screw in the end with a lock nut to go on those. Got your inner misaligns, larger ones. You've got this outer misalign, small little ones. And then we're gonna use the original bolt off the vehicle. This kit came with the steering extension, so we've got that piece on there to extend our steering. We've got this cap that's gonna bolt on here after we put this other taper misalign down in through there. So that's what goes on. We've got 4 of these extra screws. I believe I only need one of them. On the back side here, there's a place where that bracket's gonna go, I think to hold the brake line or hold some line in place, maybe the ABS line, something like that. But anyway, it looks like we only need one of those, so I think I've got 3 extras. But that's how that upper control arm all goes together, and here's what it looks like apart. So again, there's your balls, your 4 misaligns, the steering extension. We've got these socket heads, cap screws that are gonna go in here to tighten that down. The button head, I believe, holds that bracket on the backside. And then you've got your misaligns gonna drop through the hole, and the dust cap with the O-ring to hold it all on top. These are 1/4 inch by 20 thread. I did have to go in and run a tap through all of those. I think when they, either the anodizing or I think actually when they cut that slot, it maybe rolled all the threads inside. I was not able to get the bolts to go in through there from the front. I had a 1/4 by 20 tap. I just went hand tapped that in there and cleaned those threads up. Also, you might want to have a 1/8 pipe tap, because I did end up having to run a tap in and clean up these holes as well to get the grease fittings in there. So a 1/8 pipe tap, probably a good thing to have on hand to make sure you can do a little bit of cleanup. Some of these holes, the powder coat's pretty thick. It goes through in places, so you might have to go in and clean some of that up. But those threaded holes, a tap seemed to work pretty well in there. So that is sort of the overview of all of this hardware for this Baja Kits. We'll, once we get to the shocks, I'll probably run through and just look at some of the hardware for those as well. Some of those other details I didn't see in the other video. And again, we'll just kind of plug in when I'm putting the sway bar links in place. I'll make sure I get some shots of those since you can't see that in the Baja Kits video. All right, stay tuned. Excited to get this thing all together. All right, quick update on how we're doing over here. So far the instructions were pretty good on just putting in the actual king shock, putting in these bypass brackets. These holes down here on the bottom, they lined up perfect, but the holes on the Bronco, on this inner plate, they were not quite 1/2 inch, so you do need to make sure you just ream those out a little bit with a 1/2 inch drill before you're gonna get those bolts through. And I'm gonna put the bolts through from the inside just to make sure that there's no way that's gonna interfere with the shock. So those ones not too bad. On the top, a little bit tricky. You need to make sure that the shock is not in order to get this plate to slide over. Once the shock is in place, it was tight, wasn't able to finagle it on the top. So again, hold this up in place, put the shock in from the bottom, and then you're gonna wanna put your bolts on there and get that pretty secure, tightened up in place, because it's then gonna hang down over here, and I didn't realize there was any drilling required. There was a little bit of a slotted hole here, kind of like this one, but going the other direction. So that one we just had to ream out a little bit to get it to full size, and then I'm fully drilling a hole up here up top. So I kind of marked it. I'm gonna pilot drill it with a smaller drill and then punch the 1/2 inch through there. The shock is a little bit in the way, so I couldn't get perfectly straight on this one, but I got it close enough to be able to get the bolt in there. I'm gonna go deburr a little bit on the backside, and then we'll get this top one drilled, and then we should be fully mounted in there and ready to get that bypass in place. But again, I didn't know I had to drill, so just kind of bolt this upper bracket in place, use that as your alignment guide, and we'll get that in there. All right, so just a quick shot. You can see where those holes end up coming through on there. There we go, try to get the light where it needs to be. But yeah, so it's here and here is where those holes ended up. So still plenty of meat there where they're going through the metal. Just again, I just didn't realize we were having to drill, but it wasn't too bad. Got those through there, no problem. All right, let's get our bolts in and get the rest of this side done, and then we'll get these trailing arms on. Quick correction to what I said earlier. As I pulled out the old one, I figured out that this end of the trailing arm is actually narrower all around. So you're gonna put both of the narrow pieces with the cool looking misaligns. They're gonna be on the back end, pointing out the back of the vehicle. So I think these are just added on to make it look a little cleaner from the back. And then the front is wider, so both of the longer misaligns go on the front edge. So mystery solved. Had that wrong when they were on the bench earlier. This is how they're gonna go. Longer ones up at the front, the narrower ones with the cool looking Delin cover up on the back. And I'm assuming that'll be the same for the upper links, but we'll verify when we get there. All right, so we got the holes drilled. We've got all the hardware in for that upper bracket for the bypass shock. I will tell you that by the time you get that upper bracket on there, it makes it a little more challenging to get some of these bolts in the top. And you can see they're barely coming through the nylock. So I don't know, maybe should have put some Loctite on there. We'll see how that holds up. But it is just barely through the nylock, not all the way through like I would like. But was able to get an actual socket on there. Instead of trying to use the wrench, if you get a socket, there was enough room. The socket clears, helps you get around the blue center point of the shock, and made it a little bit easier to get in there and tighten those up. So used a ratchet, even got a full 3/8 ratchet in there. It comes out this front slot right there and able to get those nice and tight. Got all that hardware on. We've got the first trailing arm in place, and we've got all the hardware on the bottom there tightened up. So we're gonna drop this bypass shock in, and then we're gonna put the fender liner back on and go ahead and get that first resi mounted. We may drop the upper link in before we put the fender liner back in. And then it's time to tackle the passenger side and the fuel tank, so that's coming up next. All right, just back to confirm that yes, the uppers are the same. You're gonna put the two narrow misaligns with the black spacers on there are gonna go towards the back of the vehicle. And that aligns so that on this one, this is the driver's side. It's got the Baja Kits logo is gonna face towards the back of the vehicle. And the two longer ones are gonna go towards the front because the spacing is different on the ones you're pulling off. So it's pretty clear that the front is wider, the back is narrower, so it works out. All right, so there it is. We got that upper link in there. We got the trailing arm in. Those black misaligns, they're there. They're actually just free floating. So the misaligns are what everything bolts up tight to. Those little black Delrins are just kind of more there for that decoration, give you that cleaned up look from the back. But those do spin freely in there. We had already torqued the bottom trailing arm in place before we did the top one, and we needed just about a 1/16 of an inch of movement, so we ended up having to loosen the bottom one off just to be able to move the axle around enough to get that bolt, this last bolt in. So get them all in place, get them all in there with the bolts loose before you tighten anything up. Get both the trailing arm and the upper in there at the same time. Save yourself a step. All right, now that that is done, we're gonna go ahead and get this bypass shock in here, get that secured. We'll put the liner on, get the resi on. All right, there it is. We got one side completely done. We have the trailing rod, we've got the upper link, we've got the king shock, the bypass upper and lower bracket, and we got the bypass shock in there. I will tell you that on the bottom, unfortunately, I don't know if they've changed how they're making these bypass brackets or if King didn't have it right, but you know, when I talked to King, supposedly they made the bypass shocks that they have made for Baja Kits before. It had a 37 millimeter width down there on the bottom, but the bracket only has 32 millimeters. So I had to pop the misaligns out of the King shock, face those off a little bit. So I do have a lathe and have the tooling to do that, but that's probably not something that the average person will be able to do at home. So you want to make sure that you are getting your bypass shocks with the proper width from King to make assembly a little bit easier. The top was also super tight, so I just had to take a skim out of there. I think it was just from the powder coat, but I could get the shock almost all the way in, but I just couldn't get it where I was gonna be able to get the bolt in. So since I'd already machined the bottom end, I went ahead, popped the misaligns out up here, and just took about 1/8 thou a side, took 0.2 millimeters off a side, just to give it a little bit of clearance in there. So again, gave it 15 thou clearance from the wedge fit where it wouldn't quite go in. Down at the bottom, same thing, you know, tried to give it about 10, 15 thou. It was a nice snug fit in there to get that to line up. But yeah, I was taking a little over 5 millimeters off at the bottom. So just split that, took about 3 millimeters off or 2.5 millimeters off each bushing plus a little. So anyway, we are done. We've got one side wrapped up. We're gonna go ahead and get this fender liner, get our resi on, and then it will be time to drop this fuel tank. All right, because of that upper bypass shock bracket, you are gonna have to trim your fender liner. So didn't have to go quite as high there at that front edge, but I think followed it around pretty good on this back edge. You're cutting pretty good chunks out of there. But like I said, I could have stayed a little tighter right around the very front of that bracket, but not too bad. All right, we got our resi mounted. All right, there we go, final shot. Reservoir's in, one side is done. We'll try and do a little better cutting the liner on the other side. I think we got it. All right, we're gonna go ahead and work on dropping that tank out of there. We'll let you know if there's any major tips and tricks for that. All right, I showed this a little bit on the other side, but give you a little better shot of what's going on here. So on the other side with the powder coat, the top was a little bit barely tight, so we took a skim off of these misaligns. This one, it is actually going to fit into this upper bracket for me here. So not really able to do it with one hand, but we're good on the top. I just popped that in there. But the bottom, I mean, we're not even close, as you can see. Get some better light on there, but yeah, I mean, we're millimeters off on this side. So I've got to go in there. They're just a light tap fit in there. So if I get a punch in through the top, I'm able to knock one out, flip it over, knock the other one out. And I've got to take, again, about 2.5, 2.6 millimeters off of each of these two faces in order to get that to fit between there. So not sure if Baja Kits changed their design or if when King did them, they just had an old number they worked from. But somewhere in there, mismatched, so we're gonna modify these misaligns to get it to work. I just wanted to show you that this is where we're gonna mount the bracket for this bypass shock for the upper bracket. So again, there's kind of some holes over there, but they just don't line up with exactly what we need. And honestly, this is a little bit different than what's on the other side, so maybe closer here, but when I get the bracket up in place, I'll kind of show you that we're gonna drill those out. And then these other 2 holes, they are existing, but they're not quite 1/2 inch. So you're gonna wanna run a 1/2 inch drill through those, ream them out a little bit bigger to make sure they line up for that lower bracket as well. All right, another quick update here. During assembly, was not able to get those Delin pieces on the upper link on the passenger side. I thought it was because there was just too much twist to that upper link, but they're both identical. They're identical on the passenger and the driver side. So that extra twist, it turns out, after we got everything reassembled, got the tires on, the entire rear end had shifted over about 1 inch, and that's why it wasn't there. So if I'd have known that, maybe we could have got a ratchet strap. We might have been able to pull and shift everything back over, but bottom line is we just did not get those decorative pieces on the back. They weren't in Baja Kits' original video, so I don't really think they serve any purpose other than to look good, so we did not get those in. You can see here how much twist is in those upper links in the bar, but like I say, it's the same on both sides. They work, so if you're having trouble getting those top decorative pieces in, you might just want to pull, work it over, and you should be able to get it. The other thing I'll point out is because we've got to get that clearance back there on the around for the shock, so that clearance is in the same place, you end up with your Baja kits on the inside. So I don't know if these are just older ones and I just didn't get sent a left and a right, but bottom line is you're not going to get the fancy laser engraved Baja kits on the passenger side. That's behind the tire anyway, but it's going to be tucked in over there in order to get your clearance in the right spot. So just be aware of that. I was assuming it was going to be both of them facing out, but that is not the case. So anyway, the rest of this went together. We got those bolts, got those drilled in. We'll get our bypass on, but first we're going to torque up these upper and lower links, and let me get a couple shots of the tank and what we ended up doing for our tank drop. Tank drop, we undid the hose off the back of the tank. We undid that one vent line coming out the back of the tank. And we undid the electrical on top, and that's all we actually ended up undoing. Oh, let me move back here a little bit. So we undid the electrical right here, but we were able to unclip enough of these other hoses, just unclip them from where they snap into the top of the tank, that we actually didn't undo anything else. You can get enough flex, you can drop everything low enough. So left those hooked up, left that return line back in the other corner hooked up, and just again popped all the clips out from the top of the tank. We're able to get it to drop low enough. So now all we need to do is plug that electrical back in, start lifting the tank, push all these back into their little grooves to hold them in place, and then once it's up in place, we can reattach those 2 lines at the back. So that actually went a lot smoother than expected. Didn't break that little white clip over there in the front corner that everybody says is a bit of a problem. So see if I can zoom in on it here. Yeah, that line right there did not end up having to undo that and still got the tank down plenty low enough. All right, we're gonna go ahead and get these upper and lower links torqued in, get this tank back up in place, and then we will be working on the front. See you back in a bit. All right, passenger side is complete. Well, I almost got better cutting out around that piece. I still was having some trouble and ended up cutting a little too far, so still got high on that one, but a little better than the other side. Got the reservoir in there, and we have our 2-inch spacers on. So our rear should be 100% done. We're ready to put tires on, but I'm gonna go ahead and leave them off. We're gonna get the front up on jack stands so that after we do the brake lines, we'll have quick access to come back here and bleed all the way around. So we're gonna do a pressure bleed system. Found a great video on that. I'll post the link in here. So we're gonna do the pressure bleed method, make sure we have access to do that. But yeah, we are completely done. Tank went back up into place, no problem. Worked out well. We are on to the fronts. All right, the front end is coming apart pretty much as planned. I think we have most everything loose. We've got the steering disconnected. So again, everything's going as per the Baja Kits video. They never really show the sway bar links. And on this Badlands with the front sway bar disconnect, you know, it's again pretty wide block, so I know how we're gonna bolt the new ones on there. But getting these old ones off, it was really tight, and then once you break it with that nylock, it just wants to spin inside this ball. So there is enough. I was able to get a pair of vice grips on this little nub right here on the back end, and again, you're just holding enough pressure with vice grips to overcome the lock nut, So able to do that, get some vice grips on there, spin that off. The bottom one spins and does the same, but I'm not going to bother fighting that off. It can just stay on that lower, since we're not going to use that lower next time. But anyway, that's how you get these sway bar links off on this disconnectable sway bar. Well, there it is, total emptiness. We got everything out of here. We've got the sway bar completely removed, axles pulled out, so we are ready to start fresh and go ahead and put everything in. Since I'm upgrading to that Ford heavy-duty steering rack at the same time, we are gonna go ahead and pull that out, although that is definitely not part of the Baja Kits build. But I tell you what, with the sway bar, with everything removed, it sure does look like that's gonna be fairly easy to get out of there. So glad we're doing it at the same time. Makes it pretty nice. But anyway, that's about where we are. This is from yesterday. So we're starting on day 2. Day 1, we started at about 7:30 in the morning. Took us about 5.5, 6 hours to do the first side on the rear. Just sort of learning, figuring it all out. So by about 1 o'clock, we had one side on the rear done. By 5 o'clock, we had the other side on the rears done, even after having lunch. And then by 9 o'clock last night, we had both sides of the front end, everything completely taken apart. So it's about 7:30 in the morning on day 2, and we are ready to swap out that steering rack and get on with putting all this back together. I just wanted to get a quick shot of this. Assembly has been going really well. We got uppers, lowers in, shock is in. When you're putting your upright back on the balls, you need this thin wall 12-point socket to get on the top of these bolts inside the balls. And when we did the first side, we thought we were running into the axle, but if you just have the axle barely kind of in the hole and get everything twisted on enough of an angle, then you definitely have enough clearance to get your socket, ratchet, and everything in there and get that thing torqued down. So you just really have to finagle everything. If that's too far, if the axle's too far in the bearing at all, then you just don't have enough room underneath. So anyway, it is possible, it works. We got them torqued on there. All right, here is a shot with the sway bar links back in here on this new Baja Kits build out. So we got the clevis, we got that bolted through there. It's a little bit tough because of this new boxed section here for the bypass shock. Really hard to get a wrench on the bottom side, and it's so tight to the wall that you can't get a socket on the bottom. So you're just kind of standing a wrench on end, wedging it in there a little bit to get it tight. And because this top section is recessed, you're not gonna, or at least I couldn't get a impact drive socket on there. Just had a thin wall regular socket, was able to get on that. Still just kind of impacted it, got it tight. I find running it on the angle that it pretty much matched the box, seemed to get that ball in a pretty good place to line it up to the top. And, you know, put that larger spacer up there on the top. Seems to have that link standing pretty straight, looking pretty good. And just put the bolt through there. So because the hole inside, it was a little bit larger bolt originally on the original link. So I went ahead and put a washer on the inside of that spacer as well, just to make sure that that spacer was pushed up solid. But that's what that looks like with the sway bar links from Baja Kits on this disconnectable Badlands sway bar. So I believe this side is all done. It is torqued. We've got pretty much everything except for the resi mount on there. So we're just gonna go finish getting that sway bar link in on the other side. And we should just be ready to put the brakes back on, change out the brake lines, and get these brakes bled. All right, so like I was saying on the other side, we're gonna put this clevis down in here, we're gonna drop it in, but because it's so close on the bottom, ended up having to grind a washer and just flatten out that one edge of the washer so that it can fit up tight to the box. The nut does fit in there on the bottom side. So anyway, just a quick mod on a washer to make sure that that's gonna sit up flush when you tighten that up. We'll get this side all together. All right, got the brake lines swapped out. It's nice. It's got a, you're able to tighten it up after you get it in there. Just make sure you loosen the other one off before you pop that clip and pull it out of the hole. It kind of only fits in there one way and that holds it. Nice looking line, good fit down here on the end. I angled it in. It comes with 2 new copper washers to put on there. And it is loose at both of these other small joints, so just make sure you tighten it up in all 3 places. Since those other little clips are gone that held the ABS sensor onto it, I just put some zip strips across those. Not too tight. Was able to put it back in the original clip that held it before, so should be in there looking pretty factory and secure. Brake line's done. Knock the other one out. All right, last piece before the front wheel going on was to get this tie rod extension. So I got the extension in there. I eyeballed as straight as I could. It's going in for a wheel alignment, but eyeballed it in. Torqued the ball in at the recommended 46 pounds. Seemed a little loose. I think I probably went just a little bit tighter than that. And on here, I've seen these done a couple of different ways in the different Baja Kits videos, but I put red Loctite and I Loctited the extension into the tie rod. I get it. If I wear it out or break the tie rod, I'm probably going to need to buy a new piece. But this is only a little bit shorter thread. This seemed to give it a stronger connection here and left me with more adjustment, more in the original configuration. So I just like that better. I've seen some other people that thread this all the way on and Loctite this piece, but man, if you put the nut down here and then you just have so much less adjustment. So again, I'm not sure what the correct way to do it is, but I put the red Loctite here. So these two pieces are fused together as one essentially, and we've got adjustment in here like you normally would for the tie rod. So I've got that put together. I only have one of these at the moment, so as soon as the other one comes in, I'll get the other side done, and then we will get the tires on and drop this thing down. Do a little bit of measuring. I'll tell you that right now, we're supposed to get between 1 and 3 inches of lift with this kit. The back end on the ground right now, it is sitting at about 6.5, closer to 7 inches of lift back there. So I don't know if it just needs to move, settle in a little bit. The rear shocks have a little bit of adjustment on them. So they came set that way. The fronts are all the way down. So I don't know if maybe that's set up for the 4-door and the 2-door just sits a little bit higher, but we'll wait till we get it down, move it around a little bit. The fronts are no adjustment on them at all. So again, we'll see what we've got. I wasn't quite looking for that much lift, but we'll see where we end up. So, all right, I'll see you back here in a little bit when this thing's got all 4 wheels and we are back on the ground. All right, part of this upgrade is also switching out for a black horse emblem. Thought that was cool. And I'm gonna put on this rough country spare reinforcement here. So just gonna put on this extra plate, help support that extra 25 pounds that this tire weighs. All right, let's see if we can compare the weight of these old versus new tires. 112.2. Mm-hmm. Wow, that's really what this thing weighs. And 88.2. 24 pounds. So pretty straightforward. Opened the door, pulled off the cover, got the cables out. We're just gonna pull out these 13mm bolts around the circumference there and swap out these bolts that are on here for the door hinge. So should go pretty quick. Instructions don't look too complicated. I'm also going to pull off this current Ford emblem right here. And I thought I was gonna be able to get behind that in the door, but you can't get behind that. So I'm gonna put a piece of string in behind there, give that a tug, and we'll replace that blue emblem with a black one as well. Well, there it is. We got that rough country extra support mounted here for that spare tire. The fit on this was okay. I don't know. I think maybe might be worth buying one of the more expensive brands for that. A lot of finagling to get those bolts to line up. The steel, they're gonna put it right up against your original paint job. I ended up putting some 1/8 Fender washers in behind there. And then the washers they give you to go on this plastic piece for your tire support, they're just almost the same size as the hole. So I added an extra larger washer there. So anyway, I kind of added some hardware to make that fit what I thought was a little better, but that extension for the light gets it in a nice place. And a 37, I put it on there without putting the spacer in behind it, and I've definitely got clearance around there. Tire is not hitting. So 37 fits on there. It's an extra 25 pounds. I think that should give me the support that I'm looking for. So there it is. We got our 37 spare mounted. Get those steering rods on, or steering extensions, and we'll be able to wrap up this build and get it in for a wheel alignment. All right, part finally came in. We got the other steering extension on. Now that I've turned the wheel and I checked full lock, turn it to both ways, I find that if I leave the ABS in that top clip there, that ABS line just gets a little bit tight at full turn. I know this is also at full droop, so probably not a place it's ever gonna be once we get the tire on, get the vehicle down on it, it's going to come up and relieve some of that tension, but I still think it's worth popping it out of that block and then just zip strip it to the brake line and get that just a little bit more clearance on there in case you're ever at full droop. But the brake line seems fine. Everything else seems good. I just thought that ABS line got a little bit tight at full steering lock. So anyway, made that quick adjustment. Let's get these tires and wheels on. Well, here we are with the official after video. There's that Baja Kits all installed. Get a look and see that in there. Good shot of all those shocks in there. That larger spare all mounted on there. You can see the spacers so the tires stick out from the rear. Pretty good match to the front. Even though theoretically I guess it's a little bit different. Well, there we go. There's a walk around with the full kit installed. Wheel alignment is done. Everything aligned, no problem. Used the Ford Procal, got that retuned for the tire size. I ended up with a revolutions per minute of 585. Got a good match on the speedo. I tried going smaller at first. I had it wrong in there, and that gave me an advanced track issue because it wouldn't return the proper code. So if you're getting that advanced track issue, maybe just actually increase your tire size. 585 is where I ended up with on these 37s. Good match, no advanced track issues. All right, thought I'd do a quick review. Been driving this around, just, you know, it's got a few hours of driving on it, so I think the suspension has settled in about where it's gonna end up. So here is what I ended up with. On the rear, just measuring to here, I ended up with about 3 inches of lift in the rear compared to what I had before. I know people say go from center of the wheel to the fender. I forgot to measure that ahead of time, so I don't have that measurement, but just measuring from bumper to the ground, about 3 inches of lift in the rear is where that seems to have settled in. On the front, I've got about 2.5 inches of lift measuring here to this front bumper, so about 2.5 inches there. And I also measured to the bottom of the mirrors, so I've got about 2 inches difference there is about what I ended up. So started out at 30.5 back here on the rear, now I'm 33.5. I started out right at 30 inches on this front bumper, and now I'm at about 32.5. And here to the corner of the mirror was about 53 inches, and we're sitting at about 55. So that's kind of where the lift ended up. Right now, I've got the wheels turned as hard as they will go. I've got to say, with that new heavy-duty steering rack from Ford, super easy to turn the wheels, so I am liking that. The front end seems really tight for the steering, so very responsive with all these 1-inch balls. Everything is really tight on the front end after the wheel alignment. Looking good. Those nice front axles there from RCV, some heavy-duty axles. And you can see where we've got, I still have to have that ABS line sort of unplugged from the metal plate there at the back, just to make sure it's got enough clearance when you're at full turn on the steering wheel. And here's what we're looking at for clearance. So on the front, with these 37s, definitely not hitting anywhere at full turn. We've got clearance. Got a little bit of room for movement up and down before it's gonna hit anything. So looking pretty good that way. Come around and look at what it's looking like on the other end turned. A little bit tighter. You've got clearance there. Got clearance on the top, but probably only have a couple inches of suspension at full turn before it's gonna start to rub on that fender liner, maybe somewhere back in that corner. Again, plenty of clearance around everything else, but you start put too much movement on that suspension, and I think that's the first place it's going to run out. But don't think we'll be going over severe enough bumps when we've got the wheel turned quite this hard. This is at full lock. I've got the seat belt in there holding it all the way over, so no spring back at all. There's a better shot of that heavy duty steering rack. Just got the bigger tie rods. But anyway, overall, that's kind of what I've noticed after the first couple hours of driving on there. Liking it. Everything feels great. Came together great. Let's wrap this up. Well, YouTube, that's a wrap on another video here in the Bad to the Stone shop. We went through, got that full Baja Kits Pre-Runner Package on here on the front. Got the trailing arms, upper links on the rear. Went ahead and upgraded to that heavy-duty steering rack from Ford while we were in there. And gotta say, really love how this is looking. You just saw the before and after, kind of get a sense of what this does to change it with that 6 inches wider on the front, about 4 inches wider on the rear. Really gives it a different stance. I like the way it drives so far. It's got a little bit more of a bouncy feel to it, but I've got them set not on the softest they can go, not on the firmest, so got plenty of adjustment with these King shocks to tune it in however you want. The only thing I've noticed so far is with all these uniballs on here, definitely has a little bit of a squeaky on the front end, so I'm not sure if it just needs to break in a little bit. Maybe those lower control arms are just pivoting on the bolt. Like I said, I just got the wheel alignment done, so maybe there's a little pressure in there and it's got to just break in a little bit. But other than a little squeakiness, again, love the way it feels, love the look of it. So hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you picked up on some of the differences and just some of the extra detail that maybe you weren't getting from the Baja Kits video on this one. Hey, if you're new to the channel, I encourage you to check out the other videos, the other mods we've got on Pebbles. If you like what you see, hey, please hit that subscribe button, drop a like in here, and keep up with more videos as we get those coming out. Until next time, hope you're out in your own Bronco, keeping it bad to the stone. We'll be here working on something new with Pebbles and get that out to you pretty soon. Hey, y'all, take care.